What's going on? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's been pretty much a little while since I've been on live here, but hopefully everyone enjoyed their Christmas vacation, and you guys got to spend some time with the family, with the friends. Not the market environment I think we all ideally wanted to come back to on this Tuesday. It's just a little bit more of the same of what we have seen here within the past few weeks. A lot more so of a meltdown continuation of this. I don't even know if you can call this Tesla nosedive a cliff anymore, because this is just straight up waterfall right now with how Tesla's looking. But that's pretty much was the spotlight is that waterfall that just continues on Tesla. Am I holding out hope going into the end of the year? I think that's really more so the bigger question I'm still asking myself right now. And I'll be honest with you, yes, I am still holding out hope that we have some kind of, I don't want to say rebound, but somewhat of a bounce going into the end of the year. That's what my hopeful thought is. As you can see, I actually dialed down into the 1 hour SPY, and that pretty much illustrates basically what I'm going to be talking about in terms of a little bit of a bounce of what I'm gearing towards. But just to give you more perspective in terms of going into the new year, even though I do anticipate some kind of minuscule type of bounce going into the end of the year, I don't think they're going to be calling it any kind of meaningful recovery. But it is a little bit of a bounce, whether you also want to consider it to be potentially a Santa Claus rally that's still maybe on the way this coming week. That's something still speculative. But I'm hopeful for the bounce, like I said. But big picture wise, I still expect us to see further downside as the new year is going to be coming in. All right, so as we kick off 2023, I wouldn't plan too much on buying a lot of different things, especially those of you with long-term portfolios. I think that you are going to have more than ample amount of opportunity once we start to see this pressure ramp up, especially when we see names like a Microsoft and Apple join the party of how Tesla just looks brutally disgusting. That's when we're going to start to know that we're more so towards, I want to say a bottom, but we're going to know that it's time to start scaling into those long-term positions. So don't jump the gun just yet going into the new year. I would just say now's the time. If you didn't make your shopping list all through this year, make your shopping list for those names that you really want to put up in your portfolio, and that's what you want to gear towards. As the first, I want to say 2 to 3 months, I anticipate is going to be rather brutal as we start 2023. All right. So let's actually get in real quick. By the way, Prachi, good afternoon. Lobo, what's going on, my guy? Ricky, what's going on? That is absolutely insane. I did not actually know that fact, Ricky. It's been 12 days straight that Tesla's been red. Is absolutely absurd. That's why I say, I mean, I don't even know if you can call it a cliff anymore, because that is a straight waterfall for how bloody that thing has been. Just disgusting. El Lobo, can I take a look at EMPH for puts? Looks like there's a gap waterfall to 271.82. I will definitely take a look at that for you real quick. Give me just one quick second, Lobo, just to give you a quick rundown on what I'm looking at in terms of SPY. I dialed down to the 1 hour to give you a little bit more perspective as we kind of see a little bit of a forecast going into tomorrow more so, right? What's basically been the struggle right now has been this relative little top resistance line that I have drawn in white. That's the level in which we ended up gapping down off of Friday before we had our Christmas. Then also the level that we also topped off and rejected on off of today's price action as well. So that's more so just marking the very key level of that 384 mark that we need to break over, and ultimately getting the completion of this first gap fill towards 385 and a quarter. All right. So that's pretty much the first thing that's on aspect right now. Of course, where would I end up turning to the fact that we're gonna continue bearish? Well, I would say if my bearish case scenario would actually start if we break down below 379. If we break down below 379 tomorrow, I believe that likely ends up kind of just taking the entire bull case scenario into the end of the year out of the scenario, and we likely end up continuing this waterfall into the end of the year, or at least likely at least testing this low that we have thus far, dating back towards the 22nd. So 379 is the line in the sand in which I say, okay, we need to hold that 379 to at least build a base there if to be the case, or a V-shaped recovery like we saw on Friday, and we could take this back up to break north of 384, which has been that level that we rejected on Friday and today. All right. So that's pretty much the first case. Now, hindsight, the other thing that I want to point out is that you also have three different gap fills. There's one gap fill right above that white line. There's another gap fill that's left a little bit incomplete. That's towards 389. And then you also have another gap fill up towards 397.70. Do I anticipate all three of those gap fills to be completed if indeed we end up gapping up tomorrow? I will say no. I do not expect all three of those gap fills to be completed. I believe best case scenario, if we are able to base where we are right now, not necessarily down towards 379, I believe we do have a good shot of making this move up towards this 387 or 389 mark to get the completion of the second gap fill. That's pretty much my best case scenario in terms of the upside for the moment. I do need to see how aggressive it gets. Maybe we get a stronger than anticipated gap up tomorrow. But 389 is more so my upside target that I will look for, in which case I'm targeting to get the first gap fill and the second gap fill. And that second gap fill, by the way, it dates back towards December 15th for those of you that want reference. All right. So 389 is my upside target that I have. Of course, granted, we break over 384. We get our continuation. We start to build a little bit of momentum. Maybe we get back to back days of some upside action. And then my bear case scenario is that we actually need to hold that 379 mark as our base before our pretty much our bears really start to get more aggressive than we have seen them the past few days. All right. So that's pretty much covering SPY. Lobo, let me actually get into that EMPH chart. Let's take a look and see what's going on with that. Alright, so first things first, let's actually zoom out to the daily because I have not seen it on the daily. And it's actually funny that I actually had something charted out here. That's really interesting. Alright, so let's actually delete whatever I had here. That is the disgusting breakdown. A beautiful double top action that actually happened off the daily here at this 338 mark. It is a beautiful breakdown that you are seeing right now, so I do see why you're targeting towards that 272 roughly that you have noted. So you're actually looking for a rather, I want to say it's probably rather minuscule type of price action that you're looking at. Not very much. You're looking for a gap waterfall to 271. I want to say you're right there for the taking right now. I believe you might actually overshoot that just a bit. I believe that you actually can stretch that down to 269 is what I'm looking at before this rather gets a little bit of a snapback to attempt to get about a halfway recovery on this candle. I don't anticipate it's going to be a halfway recovery. I think it'll be close enough to about a 236 if we're looking at fib wise. And I believe if you can hold that 269, you'll see this rounds back up towards 278 is what I would watch for. All right. So 269, watch to see if that holds indeed. If it doesn't hold 269, that's going to be continuation down. You'll take that down towards 263. If in the flip side, if it holds 269, you take this back up, and this could trade back up towards 278 is what I'm watching a level. All right. So 270 is your upside. You need to hold 269 for support. You don't hold 269 for support. That's going to continue waterfall, and you're going to see that depth. In which case, next level support, I find that is meaningful is 263. All right. So those are pretty much your three marquee levels on EMPH that I'll be watching for. All right. Some other things that I could pretty much take a look at. I think everyone has Tesla on their radar right now. It's just been absolutely disgusting the way that they've really kind of held up certain names. I know when I say certain names, it feels like they're holding up Microsoft and Apple more so than a lot of other things, and that's what is allowing for Tesla to more so bleed out as much as it is. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the market is down as much as it should be when you look at the weight that Tesla particularly holds and being down 14 points today. I would have anticipated that SPY would be down at least, say, 4 points today, just looking at the way Tesla is right now. But that's where it comes into the play. Like I said, they are holding up Microsoft and Apple to a certain extent that they're letting Tesla take the beating for the entire market more so. All right, in terms of heavyweights, that is. Actually looking into Tesla right now though, I actually am looking to see if we can get a little bit of a minor support here. I thought I actually had the line drawn, but I do have a little bit of a minor support right around this 106 mark is what I'm looking for. That'll be a little bit of a dip and rip type of scenario that we'll likely see tomorrow if we get that kind of scenario. Otherwise, if we can manage to hold this 109 marker that we closed at, then I'm going to look for upside, particularly if we get a little bit of a short-term bounce, like I mentioned particularly about the two gap fills on SPY to the upside. I'm going to look to see if we get any kind of relief here going into the end of the year for Tesla. Am I going to bank on that happening? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not 100% confident on it just because of the fact that this is a straight death right now. Right? I would have to see some meaningful action take place before I play it up to my target. But nonetheless, I do have upside up towards 124.58 is what I'm watching. call it 124 half, which is roughly about a 14-point move back to the upside, which would basically recover all of today's price action and then a little bit more is what I'm looking for particularly. And so I want to see if we can end up retracing. If we can get back above 113, I will play the upside there for a day trade. I definitely will not plan on swinging anything of this sort, just knowing it's more so death. I'm not planning to swing this in any kind of direction. I would more so try to play it to the upside here. If we get a break over 113 tomorrow, I will play back up towards that 124 target if momentum is there and allows for that. Otherwise, of course, I'll be there just looking for the quick buck, the quick profit off of this. Back to the upside here, playing that breakout over 113. Flip side to that, like I mentioned, I want to see if 106 can hold. If 106 doesn't hold, I think, I mean, Ricky, you pretty much said it, the best case scenario as you could put it. It's already been 12 days in a row that it's been red. I don't think there's any rule to say that it needs to break the 12 days of just red. So if we can't hold 106, I mean, just put it in the bank. It's going to be a 13-day in a row that it's going to be roughly red. All right. So like I mentioned, 106 is my bottom level of support. I want to see if we get a little bit of a dip and rip scenario going into tomorrow. Breakout over 113, I would be targeting 124 half to the upside if we see a little bit of momentum build and some back-to-back days of kind of green action here to attempt a stage of recovery. All right. And I wouldn't even call that a recovery. I would call that a dead cat bounce more so. Because once we likely end up hitting 124, if we even get there towards the end of the year, I think we all know where it's going right back down to begin the year yet again. All right. So Tesla's one. We'll see how it plays out. Just watching on my watch list, I will say Boeing, and I think I've been mentioning that name quite a bit on my lives here in multiple days. But that is showing some relative strength. Keep an eye, especially if the market's green tomorrow. I would definitely be pretty much bullish on the fact that this should end up likely giving us a beautiful rip tomorrow. In which next target that I'm watching here for this one, once we get close enough to that 200 mark, 203 is going to be my level of resistance. But I need to see this break north over 194 half is what I need to see this break north of, and I'll play the continuation with minor resistance right around on the 197 is what I have. So 193 half is what I'm looking at for breakout, 197 for some minor resistance, and above that 203 is going to be my top end of that little potential little pump that we should end up seeing if the market isn't in green. All right. Lobo Tesla headed toward 108 and after hours. That's what I was talking about. 106. If we get a little bit of a dip and rip scenario on Tesla tomorrow, I want to see if it could hold 106. If we can't hold 106 tomorrow, I mean, you might as well just take that below 100, and I don't even want to look at it. So that's pretty much just my that is my bear case scenario. If it doesn't hold 106, I mean, you can literally put it right at that 108 mark. But more so, I don't think there's anything holding it between thin air down towards 100. All right. Let's see what else there is on the radar. Let's see what else we could take a look at. Apple's one, like I mentioned, I believe they are holding this up quite a bit. I'm gonna look to see if we can end up if this actually was a little bit of a bottoming formation that we had here today. Next level support that I believe is actually more meaningful is going to be down at 128.73 is what I'm watching. So 128.73, if we get continuation down, that'll likely be the next spot that we'll tap. Otherwise, if we do see a little bit of a flip case scenario, we see a bullish reversal here, I will look for a short-term bounce up towards 133.51 is what I'm watching for if we get a little bit of a short-term bounce. Do I expect more so kind of the flip scenario as Apple is showing a little bit more of a relative strength kind of scenario here, as I mentioned, Apple and Microsoft holding up. Do I expect that to play into the favor of momentum if we do end up seeing the market green in the next day or two? I do not expect that to happen. So that's something on the flip side scenario is that just because you see that Apple and Microsoft's kind of holding up to some extent while the more so Tesla's bleeding out, I wouldn't necessarily bank on the fact that you're going to see heavy momentum to the opposite side if the market does go green here within the next day or two. Because more than likely, what's going to end up happening is you're going to see Tesla take a lot of that recovery off of the bleeding that it's had if in fact it can end up holding up. So that's just something to pretty much look at. I don't want to say it's necessarily going to be rotation. To say, okay, if the market goes green, we're going to see rotation into Microsoft and Apple being heavily leaders of the market. I think you're going to see a lot of these names that are bleeding. They're going to end up showing some life. Another name would be Netflix. And Netflix down to what, about $11 here today. That'll be another name. I do have actually support. I thought it would actually waterfall a lot more than it did today. I have support down towards 267 is what I'm looking at. But if we end up building a little bit of a base here, right around this 280 flat mark, then I would expect us to get a little bit of a rebound, and that would take us back up towards 306. 306.82 is what I'm looking at for overhead resistance. So this will be a name that, yeah, this could end up having a double-digit day right back to the upside. In which case, yeah, Tesla and Netflix would be those two names that would they would see likely a little bit more of a recovery than we anticipate. All right, before they end up ultimately taking it right back down. All right. Let's see what else. When does the VIX give us a meaningful spike? Gold miner. If I'm being completely honest with you in terms of the VIX, I don't necessarily expect the VIX to give us that bigger type of spike here until we end up starting the new year, until 2023. I believe, if anything, what we're kind of going through, if we don't get any kind of meaningful upside action, in which case I was looking for SPY to break above 384, I think we're going to see a little bit more of a range in which we trade, being it's going to be distribution, in which case we go sideways until we get the next leg to the downside. That's more so what I would anticipate in terms of the VIX. I believe that you're likely going out towards, if I had to be more accurate in terms of timing for the VIX to give us that spike, I want to say that you're likely going to see the VIX start to ramp up about the third week of January is more so where I would be more looking for that bigger type of action on the VIX, more so than just a range that it may end up trading in. All right. That's probably my best case scenario in terms of seeing. I think you're looking for the bigger move on the VIX, not necessarily just, I want to say, a 2 3 point move on the VIX. I think you're looking more so for towards the OPEX of January, is what I would pretty much anticipate. All right. Let's see what else there's you guys are talking about. Let's see. Prachi FSLR. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like Tom was the one that actually called out a play on this. If I'm not mistaken, it does look bearish. I will say that you do have a nice rounding top action. If I likely dial down into the daily, you have a head and shoulders that's playing out on this. And if I were to target in terms of your downside target here, I would be looking down towards 146 would be my first PT. Below 146 here, you're watching this down towards 138 half would be my next PT. All right. So that's what I would be looking at, 146, and then down towards that 130, 136 is would be my next PT. All right. Let's see what else. T-bill paying 4.25 buck is avoid the chop. It's entirely possible, Ricky. I mean, it's very much hard to say. I believe that ultimately, if we don't get the bounce, like I said, I think we just continue to go sideways, which is basically just going to be more distribution until we ultimately get the next leg down to the downside going into January. All right. Prachi, you also mentioned Costco. Let's take a peep at Costco. Let's see what's going on with it. This has actually been ugly. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, they had earnings. I believe it was towards the beginning, if not last month, that they had earnings. It was looking like a wedge the last time that I actually looked at this chart. And the wedge that I had drawn out was something along these lines. So that ultimately tells me, yeah, we had earnings the beginning of the month here, and we broke what was trendline support off of this wedge, off the weekly here. That was what was my more concerning part of this. If I draw out the wedge here, kind of gives you a better image of ultimately the structure that you ended up breaking down off of. So I would anticipate, okay, first thing will be, let's see if we get a retest off of Costco here. Watch to see if we do end up getting any kind of green action in the market like I was talking about. This could retrace back up towards 473 is what I'm watching. And then 473 will be that ultimate spot. I would say, all right, that would be your greatest risk reward in terms of shorting Costco. And then in terms of PTs, I will be watching this back to the downside here, targeting 447, and below 447, that will take you down towards 436 is what I'm watching for the next PT. All right. But overall, I believe you did break structure here off of the earnings. You're basically seeing downward momentum on the back end of their earnings. And I would watch for that 473 mark. If you do get any kind of bounce, watch to see that being your ultimate risk reward type of entry point for puts for to take this right back down. All right. Other than that, I think I kind of covered the names that I really wanted to pretty much iterate about. Other than that, a lot of other names that are pretty much a lot of noise. The semis have not been doing anything as of late. I was watching support on Nvidia here. I did have support down towards 137. That's roughly about another 4 point move to the downside here. We'll see if maybe we get that tomorrow morning in terms of some kind of dip and rip scenario. We'll see if that potentially ends up holding tomorrow at that 137. But then if we get a rebound, I did have that marked up towards 147.71. And ultimately, that's also retesting a high dating back towards August 2020 before we either likely end up getting that continuation right back to the downside. All right. So that's another name. We'll see how it particularly plays out. This is one actually down a lot more than I kind of expected here, down 10 points today. Let's see if we get the continuation, if we can hold some meaningful support at 137. And we'll see how that plays out going in towards the end of the week here. All right. Other than that, though, I think I kind of covered more so everything that I wanted to. Hopefully, I was able to get the chart requests and give you guys an answer on the names that you wanted. But other than that, we'll call it short and sweet. It's going to be a light week, so don't pretty much anticipate too much. We also do have, I believe it's Monday, if I'm not mistaken, that we also have another short week next week. Granted, the fact that the market's going to be closed for New Year's. So that's something else to pretty much anticipate as well. Those of you that are thinking forward and you're getting further out expirations, be mindful next week is also likely going to be another short week as well. So that's something to just think about moving forward as you get your contracts. Those of you that are looking for swings. So other than that, though, I think I will wrap it up there. You guys all have a great afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Later, everyone.